Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Money Matters. As you know by now, Money Matters is an interactive show that aims to educate our viewers on money-related matters. And if you do want to weigh in on any of the discussions and conversations that we do have on the show, please don't forget to go to our social media platforms, utilizing the details that appear on your screen right now, and continue some of the conversations that we are having on Money Matters. But today we are having a very exciting and interesting conversation that you may really want to, listen into, because we are talking the various sources of financing your business that are available out there, and knowing very well that, we live in a tough economic environment that actually requires us to tap into other means of actually raising income. And joining me on this very exciting topic is Dr. Mongezi Makalima, who is a business and executive coach. Dr. Mongezi, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Enjoy.
Yeah, may you please, it's good to be here. Please just tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 16 years in the financing sector, and then 30 years in total as a consultant, top 50 global coach, and
50.
I've worked all over the world.
So worked all over the world. I think you got it to my viewers at home. We are not just dealing with small waters here. This is someone who really knows the topic that we are discussing today. And hopefully we should be able to weigh in on some of those 30-odd years of experience that you bring on board on the table today. But I think it's quite an exciting topic, right? Because we obviously do want to encourage people to think, outside of the box. There, we understand that the levels of unemployment, the unemployment rate is quite high.
Quite high.
Right, it's quite high. And so we need to think outside of the box, and we need to know how to supplement our income, right? We can't only just depend on what's available from a social grant perspective if I'm unemployed.
Yeah.
And now help me understand, and perhaps our viewers at home as well, right? We're talking finance sources, right, for businesses.
Yeah.
We've got various types of businesses, right? We've got your big corporates, we've got your SMEs and SMMEs.
Yes.
Let's just discuss the various types, right? And also the distinction between the SME and the SMME environment.
Yeah. So as SME and SMME, so small medium enterprises, right? That's your normal 5 million and above.
5 million
and above small businesses, right? You're making at least 5 million and above, at least in the South African
and that's revenue
definition in South Africa. But then you have micro enterprises, so that's where the other M comes.
I see.
Right. So micro enterprises are those that make below 5 million.
Yeah.
So it's Gogo in the
Spaza
shops, and all of those very small businesses where you money almost. It's mostly cash-based business. So the financing for them becomes a very different conversation.
Right? It's a trick, which is something that I really do want us to focus on, right? Because it's the alternative sources, right, of income that we are talking about, where people are diversifying, right? And not say that we're closing out the SMEs, which is quite an important conversation on its own, which we will have. But what are some of the suitable sources of finance? Because we've spoken about these various corporates, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the suitable, sources of finance, and understanding that, it could be short term, it could be medium term, it could be long term.
Yeah.
But let's just unpack a bit and focusing more specifically on the SME and the SMME environment.
Yeah. So you can split it like you split it now in terms of time, right?
Yes.
A long term, medium term, short term, etc. But you could also split it in terms of risk and price. How expensive financing is. Because people think financing, but they don't think price. So one of the things I remember in my first year business finance at university was there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So that is the basic rule around financing. Everything costs. But what I find that we don't talk about, first of all, is shared capital. Which is actually very good. It doesn't matter how big you are, but definitely not for corporates, but for small and medium enterprises, we need to consider shared capital. Shared capital means you're using your skills, you're using your knowledge, you're using your background to essentially create value. And I think that the word value is important, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So you're creating value from that perspective. Then there is, so with shared capital, I think I should expand a little bit that you're also using other people around you who have skills, knowledge, so you can negotiate. So it's a relationship capital. So you're sweating.
Oh, you're sweating.
Yeah. So you have to sweat and create something, and then after that, create value. Then hopefully sell it. Then you're able to then fund your business going forward, right? So that's the first basic one. Nobody speaks about it most of the time. We forget. We jump right into loans and all of that. But you can build products based on your skill and then sell them and then find your business going forward. Right? And then I think, of course, following that, so it's less risky but more effort-based, the sweat capital.
You have, of course, we need to sweat it, right?
Yeah, you have to sweat it quite a bit. But then you have then the different types of financial loans, financial sources. So in terms of the financial sources, what you're looking for, because people, again, go to business loan, but you can actually save or find money from your savings. I find that many people leave their organization, then they jump out and they go like, I'm going to start a business. But they don't think about how much I might need. But if you think about how much you might need, you actually can use those savings. You might use your the stuff that you've used in the past. People use their pensions, for example, to actually start the business. It's kind of dangerous.
Very dangerous.
But people do.
They do use it.
It's a risk that you take. But what I always say to people is, if you're not sure, don't use your pension. You will need it. There's lots of people in this country, in the world, who actually cannot retire. So you want to be able to retire. Let's fast forward. Then, of course, now you go to the ones that are known. For example, bank loans. Right? And then personal loans, bank loans. Those are now where they're relatively more expensive. Relatively more expensive because now you're paying interest. You're paying interest. Is somebody taking a risk on you and deciding, you know what, we like you, we think your business or what your idea looks viable, we want to give you money. So that's where you can split it between personal loans. You can take a personal loan to finance a business, but the challenge, of course, will depend on how you build. It's not so much risky as it is how you build your business. So if your business is kind of like, let's say, for example, a one-man business, it's good to have a personal loan. You can use it. But if it starts becoming partners, then it becomes a bit messy because you now have to manage the relationships about money that's coming from you. So in a sense, you are now the funder of the business. In this case, we can maybe talk a little bit about then how do you structure
How do you structure some of those things?
Then now we go into the stuff that you've mentioned. Because this is now the stuff that people know. We go to the bank. The bank finances you. So that's bank financing, long-term, short-term finance. And I'll pause there.
You'll pause there now, because I'm just, in my mind, as you're just going through all these various types, I mean, I'm a finance person, right? And I'm already thinking, obviously, there's a cost implication that comes into the picture when it comes to all of these things. So depending on the type of, I'll call it, financing products, for lack of a better word, is that there is a cost implication to it, right? Bank overdrafts and personal loans might be a lot more risky than other types of not risky, but rather a lot more expensive.
It's a lot more expensive.
That's what I wanted to say.
It's not risky. It's more expensive.
It's a lot more expensive
in many ways, and it ties you down as the owner.
Correct.
In which case,
because you're the lender, right? You went to the bank and you asked, you're the borrower.
Yeah. But also, it gets interestingly complicated if you are married. For example, if you're married in community of property, then it's a bit of an interesting issue. You kind of have to speak to your spouse, and you can't just take the money because I've had those stories where people come to my business to my coaching practice, and they're fighting. They're fighting for money because he took the money and said, "But it's our business." But you can't until you speak to your spouse.
You have to do it together. You have to do it together because you are bound by this contract that you've entered, marriage contract that you've entered, right? So maybe let's just talk about the short-term financing, right? I want to open a spaza shop, and I do need like a bit of startup capital, and we've spoken about, I could either be utilizing, which it's highly unlikely that I could have a bank overdraft, and if I want, but if I do, let's play, maybe I do have access to a bank overdraft. Why is it important then for me as a business person to really understand the importance of taking care of my credit, my credit profile, right? Because we're talking about, for me to be able to access credit, I need to have a good credit profile, right? Like the funders need to be able to trust me that I will actually be able to repay them. Why is it important that I guard my score?
Yeah. So the big concept here is risk, right? Yeah. So we keep using the word risky, keep using the word price.
Yeah.
Right? So already those words are important in terms of your credit score. So your credit score essentially in simple terms is how are you using your money all the time, particularly your debt,
correct,
when people have lent you.
Yeah.
This is registered with credit bureaus to essentially help lenders to figure out, is this a person the right risk to lend money to? Because they look at your behavioral indicators. And then based on those behavioral indicators, they can decide whether to lend you or not. So if you are listed, we use the word listed, right? All of us are listed, technically. But the type of listing will determine what kind of credit score you have. So your credit score is your risk score practically. But here's an interesting piece. If you don't have a listing at all, you're still at risk.
Because they don't know how you operate, right? I mean, they don't know how healthy you are.
Yes.
You know? So that it could be...
So many people will go like, well, I don't have a listing, I don't have a risk, so I'm not. But it is a risk. So you will probably want to, especially if you're going to start a spaza or whatever, you probably want to open take a little bit of a loan here or a credit card there or something very small, and then manage it properly for a few months to start creating a score for yourself.
So, but what happens when I might not be listed, but I do have assets, right, that might maybe be somewhere, recorded somewhere. I do earn maybe I do get a good salary or something like, along those lines. Does it then count to my detriment, the fact that I actually am not, at the moment, I'm not indebted?
Well, yes and no. So you're asking a good question in that way, because one, when you have assets and you're getting an income, it's listed somewhere, but it's mostly private. It's private information most of the time. So lenders don't have access to it.
To the private.
They depend on you to give them a pay slip.
Correct.
They depend on you to give them a bank account, because according to the law, they can't just go into your bank account. Can't just go into your employer and say, give us this person. So that's one piece of information there. It's important, but they will have to ask for you to provide that. So that's already a risk for me as a lender if I have money, because I don't know how accurate that information is about your assets. So now you mentioned assets, right? So your assets might also be lying with a bank, right? You might have a home loan that you already are sitting with. That might have a little bit of a listing.
Correct.
So at least I can access that information before I make my mind up whether I want to pursue this person. So let me make it more complicated. Immediately I contact you and I have a conversation with you about send me documents and all of that. I'm creating an expectation.
And I want you to hold it there. I want you to hold it on you creating an expectation. But Mongezi, we have to take a break. But for you, our viewers at home, please do continue engaging with us. Please do come back after the ad break, because we are continuing with the expectations that Mongezi was talking about. But don't forget to tag us as you converse with us. #MM on SIDN. We'll be back right after this. And you are still tuned into Money Matters, and we are, of course, talking today about the various sources of financing that are available out there that you can perhaps access and tap into as an aspiring business owner, or perhaps you want to extend or, expand your business. So what are some of those financing opportunities that are available to you as a viewer at home? But before we went on the ad break, we were talking about some of the different types of, and I suppose the profile, right? The credit score that I'm trying to build, and what's the risk essentially, right?
We're talking risk.
We're talking risk. and what banks look out for.
Yeah.
And in the event that I'm perhaps not listed, as we mentioned earlier on, that if I am not listed, but there are other avenues that maybe the bank can tap into to try and assess or make that assessment of how risky I am as an individual or a business person.
Yeah.
And you were talking about those expectations.
Yes.
It's just unpack.
Yeah. So what I wanted to actually, because you'll probably notice when I speak to you, I'm talking also from a perspective of the banker.
Yes.
Because many times people don't understand the mindset
of the banker.
Of the banker. Yeah. In this instance, they come in and say, yeah, but I have made 51 million in the last 3 months. How can you? No, I'm thinking risk. So part of the risk is contract risk, by the way.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Hence, I was saying you're creating expectations. So by the time I ask you to send me your proof of payments and all of those things, I'm creating an expectation that I might offer you finance.
Something.
So what financing institutions essentially do, they have 10 styles or steps. So the first risk I'm going to assess, and then I'm going to exclude you from it, is the credit score. So make sure that your credit score is clean.
Yeah.
Pay up your accounts on time and make sure that you have. Then you can go and borrow overdraft, which is an easy one to get. You can get a personal loan, which is an easy one to get if your score is good, because the risk is relatively low, but the price is a slight cost. Is slightly cost expensive. Then medium-term banking, medium-term banking then, or medium-term funding would be then where the business will now want to go a little deeper.
Yeah.
Because they're now not funding you as an individual, they're funding a business.
Yeah.
So in that instance, I'm interested in how the business is going. So I need two parts of it, two pieces of information. If you're a single entrepreneur, I need to know how you conduct your own personal business, because your risk is, the risk of the business lies in you.
Yeah.
But then I'm also going to go into how the business is working. So I'm looking for assets. Does the business have assets? I'm looking for turnover. Does the business have turnover? And then I'm looking for consistency.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going concern. Is this a going concern that 3 years from now, 5 years from
now, will be in existence?
It will be there. So I've had lots of entrepreneurs come to me, particularly when I was a mentor for financing, who go like, well, I need to borrow 100,000 from the bank. Then I start mentoring them. I go like, okay, so what are you going to use it for? Yeah. They want to use this to buy a Mercedes. I can tell you this. They want to use this to buy a Mercedes. I go, why? Because I want to look good when I go to see my clients. Wow. What does it look like and how does it contribute to your turnover and to your finance and to the long-term going concern of your business? That's what the banker is thinking about.
So might that actually be considered an asset? Say maybe, am I building perception here? And am I trying to build a rapport for my...
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. It's a dicey one.
No, it's not. It's not even tricky. It depends. So again, with long-term, short-term, medium-term, there are assets that are long-term and short-term, medium-term. So with assets, for example, I'm looking at your bank account. Do you have money coming into your bank account? Do you have buildings? Do you have that you own?
Yeah.
Do you have machinery that you own? The more I can take back and sell,
the better.
As a
collateral, right?
Then I will use it.
Yeah, it's collateral. Yeah. Okay, so now...
If I can interrupt you, I think also stock.
Yeah.
If you are in the business of stock, that's also good assets, and I would like to know about that. There's always nice tricky things you can do in terms of stock financing.
Yeah.
In that instance.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose also, funders also look into, they do their financial due diligence, which is what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
And that assessment of, how does the long term look like from a revenue projection perspective and things like that.
Yeah.
And which then just, leads so nicely into the venture capital funding that we wanted to talk about and touch on now. But perhaps before we go into that one, what happens? I went to a bank, they gave me a loan. Now I can't pay it.
Yeah. The bank will try to speak to you. The financier will try to speak to you.
Yeah.
Because all they want is to get their money back.
To get their money.
They're not looking to make your life difficult.
Yeah.
They're trying to manage their risk. Remember, I kept saying that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what they will do is immediately they will warn you. They will ask you. They will make sure that you get your money. If you don't, they already list you. So already on the listing, your behavioral score is affected. But all they're doing now is trying to get their money. Depending on how big it is, they might set the lawyers on you. But it might be that the money is so little that they don't actually want to spend too much time
from collection.
Yes, but what it means, because many people go like, oh, well, I can get away with it. No, you're not. It actually stays on your record. Yeah. Nobody is going to find this for a long, long time.
So that's what we call the blacklist.
Yes, that's the blacklist.
That's the blacklist. And we don't want to end on the blacklist.
Yes. Because there's something called a default judgment, for example, from a legal perspective. You'll notice I keep bringing the legal piece into it, because all of this is a legal contract.
It's a legal contract.
Every time you come in, it's a legal contract.
It's a legal contract, and so you need to understand the legal ramifications, right, of every contract that we get into. Venture capital funding. I've got this brilliant idea. It's a brilliant concept. It's definitely going to start in the market.
Yes.
But I do need this capital, right? Yes. Venture capital funding, what is it?
Yeah. So first of all, ideas are a dime a dozen. So many people like their ideas, right? So venture capitalists understand that. Yeah. So a venture capitalist is someone who has money. Yeah. It's not a bank. It's not a financial institution, but it's somebody who's interested and is looking around for great ideas to finance. So people think venture capitalists are saviors who are coming
angel
to yeah, they use it. There's also words that are used like that. But they are not angel
investors.
They are business people who are in the business of making money from financing great ideas.
Right.
So the key here is, again, an idea. So I'm looking to make sure that I'm helping people to translate their idea into action. Yeah. So unlike the bank and the other institutional finances that are not interested in your idea, they are interested in the business and how the business is going.
Yeah.
The angel takes a little bit more bigger risk in your idea, and the risk that the idea might not turn out to be as great and stunning as you think.
As we think, right? Because it starts from the conceptual stage, right?
Yeah. So they're essentially your partner throughout
as I'm building the business as your business. But then I suppose if they are taking more risk, that means they demand more return, right?
They want more return.
They demand more return.
And most of the time at the beginning of that transaction, and that's what many people don't understand, they actually own more of your business.
Yeah.
In terms of that capital that they
outlay, they actually
until such time as you have worked, depending on the terms of the contract.
Yeah. Sure. So be very careful. I suppose for our viewers at home, it's just also being very careful, especially when you do believe in your idea and your concept.
Yeah.
Especially when you've developed your idea into a concept. Right, and a workable concept is that understanding what some of those implications of the various funding that we are going after.
So the further down you go into the idea translation process, the less maybe you want to talk to venture capitalists and more to
the bank,
more established institutional finance.
I see. That's actually quite important, right? Because sometimes maybe that distinction is not there. Yeah. Where I could have actually developed, had my idea conceptualized and actually do have a product or what do you call it? It's a prototype.
Yeah.
I might already have a prototype of my product, that is available out there.
Yeah. Then your conversation is different.
It's different, right?
Because one of the funding we don't talk about before we run out of time is, for example, funding from government and state. So this is where now you can get more grant financing. You can essentially get subsidies and all of that. So you can access those DFI, development finance work in that instance, because then you're no longer just dependent on venture capitalists. You can mix these things up. Yes. You can go to the IDCs.
You can go to the IDCs and people in youth. The youth development funding.
But there's also international funders, because many of our people, particularly from a South African perspective at least, they're not looking internationally. But I encourage people to do that.
Right? Yeah, and I've worked with a few businesses that actually do, or that did get funding overseas actually. Yeah. So that's quite an important thing to look at. Yeah. And those other types of funding. Maybe let's just go to your big corporates where the assumption is always that they've got their ducks in a row.
Yeah.
There's always the assumption that because I'm a big corporate, I do have everything under control.
Yeah.
But let's just
that. The bigger you are, the harder you fall.
the harder you fall.
The harder you fall.
Yeah.
It's because you have more employees, you have more assets and all of those things. So it is important to have a great finance specialist who is working. That's your biggest finance. That's the biggest asset in that instance. Have someone who's a financial manager, not an accountant.
Not a bookkeeper.
Not a bookkeeper. They have to be very smart, because then they start talking about things like debentures. They start talking about things like corporate financing. They start talking about debt factory. How do we just take debt and we sell it?
How do you leverage, right?
Leverage.
How do I leverage some of those things and just make sure that it actually works for the benefit?
And so you have more options, more smarter options, but you need a smart person to be able to leverage that.
Yeah. Because actually, I do think that sometimes what, small businesses do overlook is that finance and that finance mind, right? Even as small as a business you are, especially when you're trying to tap into the various sources of funding, I think it's quite important that people understand that having a finance person behind you, not a bookkeeper, but a finance person who is going to help you unpack some of these things and the risks, and actually look at the fact that, are you viable long term, or are you just making these glorious plans, right, where you're just like, where a lot of your costs are fixed, which is obviously a big no-no, right? As a small business, I can't start off with a big high staff complement that are actually on a fixed, contract.
Exactly.
Sometimes people do forget about some of those things, which is quite interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Mongezi. It's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure, having this conversation and discussion with you. And I think our viewers at home have learned quite a lot, and there's a lot more that they can still go and research and learn about, but at least we've sparked a few ideas and thoughts, right? It was quite thought-provoking, but thank you for joining us, and may God bless you. And that brings us to the end of this particular conversation to our viewers at home, but it continues right after this, because you will be engaging with us, right, on our social media platforms. Do not forget to tag us, #MM on SID. But from me, Joy Malidi, and the rest of the Money Matters team, it is goodbye and God bless.